Missionary on the Mountain podcast, where we discuss all the pertinent social, religious, and political topics of the day. Join us weekly for scripture, news, interviews, and insight into the issues that matter to you. Broadcasting from 8,000 feet deep within the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, consistently conservative and unapologetically Christian. Here is your host, the Missionary on the Mountain, Kenny Easton.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode number 2 of the Missionary on the Mountain podcast. I am your Missionary on the Mountain, Kenny Easton, and I'm coming to you from 8,000 feet here in the mountains of southwest Colorado. Thank you for tuning in to the Missionary on the Mountain podcast. Please share, like, and subscribe with your family and friends so that they can join us for our weekly dose of scripture and situations and news and everything else that we bring to you on this podcast. Let's start today with our mission update.
Mission update.
There's a lot going on in camp right now. Mostly mud. We are currently in a snowstorm, so if you hear lots of wind going on outside, there is a blizzard outside at the moment. We're supposed to get 4 to 8 inches of snow. But while we're waiting on things to thaw out and then dry out, we're accomplishing a lot. Camp start, like I've told you in the past, in June, and so we're still recruiting helpers and staff. If you're keeping us in your prayers, which I certainly hope you are, we still need a nurse for the first week of camp, and that is June 3rd, I believe. So we need a nurse. Pray for that. I finished the curriculum. Like I told you last week, we're taking a passage from Matthew, the "Take my yoke upon you because my burden is light." That is what Jesus said to us. And so we're going to be teaching the kids a little bit about that. They have a lot of burdens, teenagers especially, this day and age. There are lots of distractions. They're in the palm of their hand or in their pocket. There are things like profanity and pornography and lots of stuff that can be put into their eyes and ears that are not good for them and not good for their development. So we're going to be teaching them during camp to give those burdens over to Jesus because his burden is light compared to ours especially. So keep them in your prayers as we approach camp season, because we are hoping that, we trust that God will send us the kids that need to hear what we have to say, and that he will work the Spirit in their hearts and hopefully bring them to belief in him. So the curriculum is done, and we will keep poking at that, and we're going to hopefully in the next 2 weeks print that out and put it into booklet form. So let's see. Like I said, we're knee deep in mud right now, and we're in a snowstorm, but our 50 chickens are thriving and doing well. They are in the garage in a chicken tractor that I made. Hopefully I can put up a screenshot of that if you're watching on YouTube. They are doing great, and like I said last week, we have 6 Buff Orpingtons, 6 Barred Rocks, and then 38, I believe, Cornish roasters. The roasters will probably be butchered mid-May before camp. I'd like to get it done before camp because camp gets busy, and pretty much June and July are really, really, really hectic around here, so I won't have time for butchering then. So we're going to try to get them raised up. Usually Cornish roasters get to their full size in 8 to 10 weeks, so we will hopefully be able to butcher them mid-May. Also, I just ordered 2 new pure sine wave inverters to clean up the camp's solar power. So camp, we're off-grid completely here. There are no wires connecting us to anything, which is how I define off-grid. We do pump a signal, internet signal in from mountain via laser. So we do have solar capabilities, we do have internet capabilities, and we do have power, and we do have water and all those things, but we are off-grid, so we use a well for our water, and we use solar and a battery bank for our electricity. We do have a backup generator in case that can't handle the load, because sometimes we have 200 and 300 people up here at camp, and as you can imagine, solar array, a little bit tough to make that work for that many people. Especially since we're a camp and a lot of those people bring RVs and campers, and all it takes is just a couple air conditioners running and our solar can't handle it, so we have to switch switch over to the generator. But we have a 3-cylinder John Deere generator that does just fine. So let's see here. I'm hoping to have those 2 sine wave inverters installed in the first week of May. We have a guy who set up our solar setup, and he's going to be helping us with that. So we're hopeful that we'll get that done before May. And the reason that we have to do that is because we've upgraded, as I told you last week, a lot of the electrical components and sound components to our chapel. And those of you who've worked with sound equipment know that sound equipment does not like dirty power. It likes nice, clean sine waves coming in, or things don't sound right and don't act right and can often break. So we're going to clean up our power, and that's what those 2 new pure sine wave inverters are for. That was a price tag of about $10,500, so this was not a cheap thing to do, but it was something that we had to do. So we will get those in hopefully soon and have them installed in the first week of May, and that will help us with all of our chapel stuff. So finally, I, of course, am an in-faith missionary, and I work solely on support from donations and from supporters like you. So if you feel so moved as to support me and my family, go ahead and look in the description of this video and click that in-faith link and go ahead and donate there. And we sure appreciate it. So let's get right into the news.
Extra news from the pews.
So last week we talked a little bit about the Mueller report and about Jussie Smollett. There's no new information on the Smollett case right now, so we'll leave that for another week. The Mueller report, the full report with the appropriate redactions, of course, should be out this week, according to the Attorney General, William Barr. William Barr testified before Congress this week for a few days. He still holds his basic findings, although he's specific to make sure that you don't call it a summary, because it is not a summary, it's just the basic findings. And those basic findings are that Trump did not collude, nor did he obstruct the Russia investigation. So, of course, the Democrats are up in arms about this, saying that Barr is compromised and he's just a Trump lackey and nothing more. Of course, that's not true. William Barr served as Attorney General under Bush as well, so this is not the first go-around for him, and if you watched any of the hearings, he is a well-spoken and very competent Attorney General. He knows what he's doing, and he's good at what he's doing, so I tend to give him the latitude to make these decisions and to make things public when they need to be public. Republicans even are a little bit angry, but they're more angry because this investigation was started. They feel it was started under false pretenses. That would be the Christopher Steele dossier that was paid for by the Clintons. Republicans are angry about that. They also want to get to the bottom of the alleged corruption at the highest levels of the DOJ, the FBI, the IRS, the CIA, and potentially the Obama administration during and after the 2016 election. This could get really intense here over the next couple weeks. In fact, Attorney General Barr says that the Inspector General has an open investigation into the FISA process, and that's the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act that allows us to basically spy on foreign intelligence sources. But they feel Barr and the Inspector General apparently feel that this process may have been abused by those in charge at the FBI. Specifically, this kind of incriminates James Comey, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Andrew McCabe, among others. This is gonna be interesting to see where all of this goes. But for now, we're just kind of waiting to see the full Mueller report, and then we're waiting till about mid-May, they're thinking, for the IG's report about what happened as far as FISA abuse goes. So there's lots of other news to cover, but we'll get to the rest of it next week. And let's get into today's words of wisdom, which are from one of my favorite characters from C.S. Lewis, Aslan, from the Chronicles of Narnia.
Words of wisdom.
So this is C.S. Lewis from the Chronicles of Narnia, and I believe this is from the Silver Chair. This is Aslan talking. But first, remember the signs. Say them to yourself when you wake in the morning and when you lie down at night, and when you wake in the middle of the night. And whatever strange things may happen to you, let nothing turn your mind from following the signs. And secondly, I give you a warning. Here on the mountain I have spoken to you clearly. I will not often do so in Narnia. Here on the mountain the air is clear and your mind is clear. As you drop down into Narnia, the air will thicken. Take great care that it does not confuse your mind, and the signs which you have learned here will not look at all as you expect them to look when you meet them there. That is why it is so important to know them by heart and pay no attention to appearances. Remember the signs and believe the signs. Nothing else matters. I have one other word of wisdom that kind of relates to this, and this is from Deuteronomy 6:4-9, and it says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, and when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates. Today we have a new segment called Scriptural Situations.
Scriptural Situations.
Today's situation is the situation of the Good Samaritan. Now, for those of you who don't know this story, or this parable that Jesus told, it's the parable of a man who was traveling along a road and he was accosted by thieves and they robbed him and left him to die. Then, as a little bit of time passed, we had multiple people pass this man in need who's been beaten and bloodied and left to die. The first few people passed him by, and this is a priest and a Jew, etc., etc., and they passed him by and left him and went on about their way. And then the last man to finally come across him was a Samaritan. Now, if you don't know anything about Samaritans, in the days of Jesus, a Samaritan was looked down upon, was frowned upon. It was a second class of citizen. So people from Samaria, the Samaritans, were not helped or even talked to for the most part in the Jewish world. So the Samaritan ends up going and helping this man and binding his wounds and taking him to an inn and paying it for him to stay in this inn until he's become all the way back to health. And then he comes back and checks on him too. So today in the scriptural situations, we are going to put ourselves in the place of these people. So first, we are the priest or pastor or Jew or traveler. Picture it in today. If we came across somebody that was desperately in need, granted we don't walk from place to place today and the thieves in the mountains aren't as big a deal today, but we do have people get robbed and mugged and all sorts of horrible things. So what if we ran across this person? In fact, maybe we have. How often do we walk by somebody who's in need? Do you have homeless people in your community? People who are infirm or elderly or can't get around or are homebound? How often do we walk past them? Why do we walk past them? Why do we ignore them? Why do we ignore their plight? Why do we ignore the hardships that are being thrown upon them? And in the the Good Samaritan story, of course, this wasn't his fault. He was just traveling, right? We don't know a whole lot much more about him except that he was a traveler. So how should we react when we're the priest or the Jew or the traveler that walks by this person? How should we react when we are the person that walks through our town and ignores dilapidating communities with homeless people and drug addicts and all of these horrible things, alcoholism? Why do we walk past them? Let's think about that for a second. Why do you walk past the people that need you most? I can't answer that for you. I know that sometimes in my life it's fear. Sometimes it's more than fear. Sometimes it's being caught up in what I'm doing, thinking I'm more important or that my schedule is more important than this person who could really use my help. So when we react like this, when we react in a way that we know is not right, we know we're not supposed to be the person that walks by the person in need and ignores them or crosses the street just to not be that close to the person that needs us the most. How should we react when we make this choice? Well, and I think part of this is asking forgiveness. You know, we knew we did something wrong, right? maybe we go back and pray for that person that was in need. Or better yet, maybe we go back and find that person and meet that need in post. So, if we're not that person, maybe we're the Samaritan. Maybe we're the guy who does help. Maybe we're the one who, when we see that person in need, we are just convicted to give or to help or to bring that person under our wing or to do anything we can to help. Maybe that's us, which as Christians, we're called to be the Samaritan, right? Do we do enough? Do we do what the Samaritan did? Do we go the extra mile? Or do we have expectations of being paid back? I mean, this guy, the Samaritan, took this guy to an inn and paid for him to stay at the inn and for the innkeeper to take care of him and dress his wounds. Do we do that? Do we go the extra mile? Do we do even enough, let alone the extra? And if we don't, why not? Why not? Do we have expectations of being paid back? Is that why? Do we think our time's too valuable? And so we do what we can do, but not a lot more? Are we the Samaritan? And then finally, we could be the innkeeper, right? So when God delivers someone to us in need, how do we respond? Right? This person in the story is bloody and beaten, and it's going to be a lot of extra work for this innkeeper, right? This innkeeper is going to have to dress these wounds and change these bandages daily and bathe this man. And honestly, we don't even know if the man's conscious, right? So he may not even know who he's helping. So when God delivers someone to us, how do we respond? Do we say, oh man, this is going to be a lot more work than I bargained for, or I didn't sign up for this. This person was dropped on my doorstep, right? Or do we do what the innkeeper presumably did and take this man in and do what is necessary and change his bandages and treat his wounds until he is back to full health? And even then, do we accept the payment? We think the innkeeper did, but do we? Do we need to? Or is this how we minister and how we give back? Finally, are we the thieves? This is something we don't think about too much. But are we the one who caused people pain or harm? Was it us? Did we jump them? Did we rob them? And this, of course, probably isn't literal, but do we hurt people and then not apologize? Do we hurt people and then leave them alone to die or worse? Do we make comments that hurt people to the core and then never apologize for them? Do we take things from people and then never give them back? Or, as the thieves, do we look back and say, man, this was the wrong thing to do? Do we go back? Now, the thieves in this story didn't, or at least we don't think they did. But if we are the thieves, A, we probably shouldn't do this in the first place, and we should not be the thieves. But we all have our thieving moments. We all have our moments where we're the person causing harm. So do we apologize? Do we make recompense and come back? Or do we leave them alone to die? So this is a parable. Right? Jesus told this parable, and it's about how to treat others with love and kindness and respect, regardless of your position in life, regardless of compensation, regardless of prejudices. We're human beings, and we are called to love each other and to help each other and to build each other up, not tear each other down, to heal each other, not hurt each other. And that brings us to today's Scripture of the Week.
Scripture of the Week.
This week's scripture is from 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. But understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty, for people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having the appearance of godliness, but denying its power. Avoid such people. Today we have an excellent guest, and I would like to welcome Dr. Kristen Mauk to the mountain.
Welcome to the mountain.
Today we are joined by Dr. Kristen Mauk. She is a professor at Colorado Christian University and has been teaching for 27 years. She has a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and 2 doctorates. And she has taught and started doctoral programs in the past. And now she is in charge of what program at CCU?
The Doctor of Nursing Practice program at Colorado Christian University.
Wow, very good. All right, so Dr. Kristen Mauk is also my mother, so I am lucky to have access to such a brilliant lady. Dr. Mauk is the top of her field, probably in the world, I would imagine. She literally wrote the book on geriatric rehabilitation, and not just one book, probably multiple books. If I'm not mistaken, you've written or edited 8 books with a 9th that was just released. Is that accurate? So, my mother is spread herself thin, but for some reason she's able to juggle so many different things and keep all of these balls up in the air at the same time, or all of these plates spinning, or however you want to phrase it. So we're going to chat with Dr. Mauk just a little bit today. How are you, Mother?
I'm doing fine, Kenny. How are you?
Good. Welcome to the mountain.
Thank you.
So first, tell us a little bit about your teaching history. Why did you become a teacher? Because originally you were a nurse. You worked in the emergency room and at all sorts of places. Everywhere a nurse can work, you've worked.
Almost, yes. Worked in lots of different places, but settled on my specialties of rehabilitation and geriatrics. So my favorite group to work with is older adults who have disabilities.
Okay. What drew you to them?
I think my grandparents, who would be my father's parents.
My Nana.
Yes, I called her my Nana too. And I really felt close to them. They were one of the steadying influences in my life. And I think they are probably the reason why I was attracted to working with older adults.
Excellent. So you've been teaching, like we said, for 27 years. How long have you been at Colorado Christian University?
I've been at CCU for almost 4 years this summer. And I am now the graduate program director. So I am in charge of the 2 online programs that are at the graduate level for nursing, and that's the Master of Science in Nursing and the Doctor of Nursing Practice in Visionary Leadership, which is a brand new doctorate and the first doctorate for the entire university at Colorado Christian.
Oh, the first doctorate in general, not just the first nursing doctorate.
Yes.
Wow,
and
very
CCU
exciting.
is 100 years old. So this is a great, wonderful thing for CCU. And in fact, we were just in Denver and recognized in the Senate and the House at the Capitol building for our new DNP program.
How exciting. And so did you meet any politicians and things like that? Rub shoulders with the bigwigs?
Oh, yes.
Fun. So this wasn't your first experience starting a doctoral program, though, was it? You did something similar to that at Valparaiso University back in Indiana, where we used to live.
Yeah, at Valparaiso University, I wasn't in charge of the entire program, whereas at CCU, I really am directing it and helped start it up. And I had a wonderful task force working with me, and we had an outside consultant, Chris Alekny, from CCNE. So she helped us form our doctorate so that it will be easily accredited as soon as we're able to apply for accreditation. But at Valparaiso University, I helped develop some of the courses in their DNP program, and that really prepared me for actually guiding CCU to the first doctorate.
Yeah, a great stepping stone, it seems like.
Yes.
Great. Well, that's just one of the many facets of things that my mother does. How many kids do you have?
8. 8 children.
What are the ages?
Well, the youngest is 2 and a half.
Also a grandson as well as an adopted son, yes?
He is. So he was our grandson who is now our son. And we have cared for him since he was 3 months old, and now he's 2.5. So he's the youngest. And then we have a 17-year-old son and an 18-year-old daughter.
And that's Vika and Dana, who were adopted from
Yes.
Russia, which I helped homeschool, and that was a great experience for me as well.
You did, and they still talk about that all the time.
I'm sure.
That was a great
Probably
experience.
half good and half bad things, but that's okay.
Mostly good, mostly good. I think you bribed them with food.
Yeah, I still do
Things
that
like
to the nieces and nephews. Yes, bribing with
Yes.
gummy bears and food is a very effective way to do things.
It is.
Yeah.
So Vika is 18 and she is a freshman at CCU, majoring in elementary education. And Daniel will be joining her. He's graduated early from homeschool and has worked a year. And then he will be starting at CCU in the fall, and not sure of his major yet. And then next oldest is Jordan. He is 25, almost 25. And then Elizabeth is 27. And then my 3 biological children, of which Kenny is the middle child. We have Daniel, who's 32, and Kenny, who's 35, and Rachel, who's 36. So wide age span there.
So from 2 to 36, or
Yep.
3 to 36. Wow, that is pretty amazing, pretty impressive. So that's not all you do. We said you write books as well. Tell us a little bit about some of the books you've written. Now, most have been textbooks because obviously you're top of your field, and people want to hear what you have to say. And so you have textbooks in universities and et cetera. But what else do you write?
Well, let me talk about my textbooks first, because
Sure.
I'll just put a plug for those. Because I think you mentioned earlier, as an educator, how did I decide to become that? Well, I think when I went into education, it was mainly because I felt like I had already 10 years of experience in nursing and I had a lot to say. And I really wanted to pass that along to students. And one of the best ways of doing that, besides being in the classroom or teaching online, is to write. Because I can reach many more students with textbooks than I can just teaching them through my classrooms. So there are a lot of nursing programs that have adopted, especially my gerontological nursing text, which is one of the best sellers in that area of nursing.
Well, just to toot my own horn, I think I edited 1 chapter of that book.
You may have. I think you have helped edit
Yeah, I think I
probably
did.
several of my books. Yes, for an extra
But
pair
that
of
is a
eyes.
very, very popular book. And do you know
It is.
how widespread publication of that book is at universities?
I don't, but I do know it is one of the top 3. It probably is in the top spot now. Last year it was right up there among the top 3 books in gerontology nursing.
So it was not hyperbole when I said that you are the top mind in your field.
I don't know if that makes me the top mind, but let's just say I'm motivated to write and to get others to write in an edited textbook to disseminate our knowledge for the next generation of nurses.
I would say rarely are the top minds in their field not motivated. So I think that qualifies you for top mind in your field as well.
Thank you.
So tell us more about your other books.
So I also have a rehabilitation nursing book, and that one came out in 2012, and rehabilitation is my other passion, and I think the marriage of caring for older adults and adding that rehabilitation component is the perfect type of care for older adults to keep them independent as long as possible and to help them live with chronicity, which many of them have. I can put myself in that age group too pretty soon. I'm not dating myself. And the next 2 books that I have coming out, one just came out and it's called A Ministry of Care. And it is really how to promote health in your faith community. So in your church, your parish, your temple, your synagogue, whatever. And that was co-authored with Cynthia Russell, who is the dean at Holy Family in Philadelphia. And she was one of my friends from Valparaiso University too, so we've been colleagues for a long time. And then the book that will be coming out in the fall is published by Jones and Bartlett, and that is a textbook which we're hoping, I think, will be one of the new foundational textbooks that is used across the country in faith-based nursing programs. And the name of that book is Nursing as Ministry. And that's the philosophy at Colorado Christian University where I teach. And so it was wonderful to gather my colleagues. They wrote about half the chapters in the book, but we also have people from all different parts of the country, all different fields, from academe to even theologians and philosophers and nurses, nurse administrators, nurse clinicians. So we have quite a variety of people, I think 28 authors who wrote or co-wrote chapters in that book, which has 21 chapters total. So we're very excited for that to come out. It's in copy edit phase now, but it should be available for schools to use in the fall of
What was the name of that
2019.
book one more time?
Nursing as Ministry,
Nursing
published by
as Ministry.
Jones and Bartlett.
All right. Well, we look forward to seeing that come out. And yeah, I don't know if that's one of the ones that I'll get to read, but I'll give it a shot. We've covered just a little bit of the motherhood and a little bit of your academia, but tell us a little bit about your personal life. You're a Christian woman, raised your children in a Christian household, and I credit you with the large majority of my faith and where I've ended up, and now I'm a missionary here on the mountain. So tell us a little bit about that. How is it juggling the life of a conservative woman of faith with being a leading mind in your field? A lot of times today we're given this perception that you can either choose one or the other, being a great mother who stays at home and invests all of her time in her kids, or a penultimate professional. You've managed to do that and 3 or 4 other things. How?
That is a great question. Thank you, Kenny, for asking it. So I would say a lot of it comes to having your priorities straight and having a deliberate work-life balance. I remember my daughter when she was in veterinary school, she told me that one of her professors said, "You can have it all, just not all at the same time." And I thought that was a very interesting quote, which is probably mainly true. I haven't thought about it enough to decide whether I think that's true or not. But I do know that for me, I have to always keep my priorities straight. And when I don't, that's when I can't manage all the things I feel like God's called me to do. So for me, those priorities are God first, then my family, and then everything else. So everything else includes jobs and writing and sometimes traveling and sometimes going to other countries to teach about rehab nursing or geriatrics or wherever the need is. But I always make it a matter of prayer to know what God wants me to do. And I've learned to say no to certain things, but to say yes to certain things. And I think making it a prayerful, conscious decision, what you say yes and no to, is really one of the keys to success if you're going to be a working professional woman with children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always found it to be incredible that you can juggle so many things at the same time. As we said earlier, that it's just, it blows my mind that you were able to raise 2 generations of kids and write books and, get all the degrees that you have and still keep your sanity. I think that's kind of the most amazing part to me. I tend to be able to juggle 2 or 3 things pretty well. But if you get beyond that, I get flustered and things fall apart. And then even those 3 things don't work out well. Whereas you seem to be able to take 5 or 6 things that are really very difficult and excel at every single one of them. And so I find that just very fascinating. So,
well, a lot of people lately seem to have said a similar thing to me. And I guess that surprises me because I don't think of it like that. Like I'm so busy and I'm doing all these things. I think of it as when God calls me to do something that I feel passionate about and where my gifts are. So the intersection of my passion, my enthusiasm, and my gifts. Then he provides the time and the willpower and the stamina to do it. And only when I keep my eyes on him and my priorities where they should be, then he blesses the works of my hands. And I feel like lots of other people I know and that I work with I feel like they do the same thing that I do. They say they don't, but I feel like I'm surrounded by a group of wonderful Christian women who are also doing the same thing I am, raising children and things like that. But a typical day for me might include on my breaks or lunchtime, I'm changing dirty diapers, running after a 2-year-old. So my day may look quite different from other people's. And sometimes I do my writing between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. Sometimes that's the only time that's quiet when I need to be writing. And that used to be in the morning, but that's kind of been dictated by the needs of my littlest guy at home now. So, but I have to keep telling myself, when God calls you to do something and you feel strongly about it and you've heard his voice and that he's called you to do a certain thing, then he will provide you the grace to do it.
And equip you to do it
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, here in the mission, here at the camp, I never knew why I was acquiring this certain set of skills, but now that I'm here, I kind of get it, because I use pretty much every skill I've acquired over the years, and just a fraction of the skills that you have, but one day I'll get there, I imagine. Maybe not 2 doctorates and multiple other degrees, but yeah, so.
But the most important credential of all those ones that you have mentioned is MOM, mom. And to me, that's the most important one.
That was the most important to me too. I think, without that, I wouldn't be here. So, so tell us a little bit about what you're doing now as far as your work in China. And I know you've been to UAE and you've been to Saudi and a few other places where you've been. Well, tell us a little bit about that. They don't have the same rehabilitation system that we're blessed with here in America.
Right. So rehabilitation nursing is one of my specialties, and I absolutely love this specialty because what it does is help people that either have a disability, a physical challenge, or a chronic illness that they're dealing with, so something long-term, to do self-care as long as they're able to. So it helps people live again, to get back on their feet. And I have always loved working with people who had those types of challenges. And I'm really not sure where that came from, that love, but I knew as soon as I stepped on a unit where there were patients like that, that was going to be my area, but especially working with older people who have that. So I've kind of melded those two specialties. But about 4 to 5 years ago was our first trip to China, and your brother Daniel and my husband Jim and I went, and I think we took Vika and Daniel with us too on the first trip. And that was really just
for clarity, I have 2 brothers named Daniel.
Oh, sorry.
Well, one is
Little
adopted
Daniel
and one
Big
is a biological brother. But yeah, we call them Little Dan and Big Dan, even though they're about the same size now. But anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Yes, we have 2 sons named Jordan and 2 sons named Daniel, just to make it more confusing for everyone. Anyway, I can keep them straight. That's what counts. So our first trip was really just kind of an exploratory trip. So I did a lot of teaching on that first trip, and then we were invited back, and that trip was to Shanghai and Hangzhou, China. And then we did also go back to those cities again with the same physician who was trying to start rehabilitation nursing in China. And just to give you an idea of what the healthcare system is like in China, nurses are very low on the totem pole. They are not taught to think critically or to do assessment. They're not taught leadership skills. It's not the same as our Bachelor of Science in Nursing prepares nurses at this level in the United States. So physicians there are, they pretty much tell the nurses what to do. So it would be like our model was maybe 50 years ago in the US. So that whole idea requires a mindset of its own. So that is like a paradigm shift to even work with nurses there, because they don't have a lot of autonomy or critical thinking or the ability to make decisions for patients that our nurses do in the US. So that it's very different teaching over there, not just because of a language barrier. So when you go over, you work with an interpreter because it's very difficult with the medical terminology. Some of it does not translate into Mandarin, which is their primary language where we have been doing education. So that in itself is a challenge. You speak a sentence, they're translating. You speak a sentence, they're translating. And it's very interesting. The Chinese nurses they're like sponges. They are so hungry for knowledge. They are very intelligent and they want to learn. And when you introduce to them a different way of teaching, a more Western way, a different idea that nurses can think for themselves, that they can make decisions, they can help promote the health of a family, and that they don't have to just be the handmaid or the person who's doing what the doctor tells them to do. They can actually make nursing diagnoses and decisions and educate patients and families. That is like an aha moment. And when you see it in the classroom, even with the language barrier, it's amazing to see these lights go on. So we like to do a lot of hands-on with our teaching. So when we go, my middle son, or second son to Kenny, Big Dan. He usually accompanies us, and he does the technology. So he's running my PowerPoints, videos. He's doing everything from the computer for me so I can just stand up and teach. And he also helps do demonstrations. So we do a lot of role playing. We do hands-on things like how do you take the wheelchair legs off a wheelchair? If you never had a wheelchair with removable legs, which in many places we taught, they did not. They were welded on if we could even find a wheelchair. Simple things like that. How do you transfer someone who can't move their legs? How do you transfer someone with a stroke who's paralyzed on one side? So all of those things to them were aha moments. They love doing hands-on things because a lot of their nursing training is basic, and so it's hands-on tasks. Like they're great at starting IVs. They can change dressings. They can do those tests, and that's comfortable to them. But we asked them to step outside their comfort zone and to do something that didn't even exist in China. So China really didn't have any post-acute care until a few years ago, not very many years ago. And it's not available to the general public even now. So if people want to have rehabilitation, usually they have to have a lot of money and they have to go to a special facility that's really only made for people who can afford to pay for it. But there is such a need in China. They have so many people, they have so many chronic illnesses, they have so many accidents with traumatic brain injury and spinal cord injury from all the things they're building and from the mass amount of transportation and accidents and things like that. Plus they have hypertension because of their diet being high in sodium. So we see a lot more strokes and things like that. And so they have a lot of chronicity. And the Chinese government has been wonderful to recognize this. They recognize it in different cities. They recognize it as a nation. And they actually take steps to emphasize certain things. And rehabilitation now is one of the things they are emphasizing. And it is just growing very quickly.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but in China, my understanding is that about the last generation or so, they've concentrated on infrastructure and they've built entire cities where there aren't even people in them.
Yes.
But in thoughts of the future of expanding and their population growth and things like that. So now it seems to me that they're shifting their focus to how to take care of the people that now they've built housing for, basically.
You are correct. Yes, it's shifted from the infrastructure now to more of the healthcare service industry.
And so that's why there was no rehabilitation until, the last 5 or 10 years, maybe.
Right. When it existed, and it's still not available to the general person.
And so what do they do? The general person, do they send them home to their family? Or?
Yeah, they have surgery. So let's say somebody had surgery for say a spinal cord injury, and they're great at their acute medical care. I mean, the physicians are wonderful, the surgeons are wonderful, they give great acute care, but there wasn't anywhere for them to go. You might have, many times they have a 3,000 bed hospital, acute care. How many therapists do you think you would have for a hospital like that, Kenny?
For a 3,000 bed hospital, therapist-wise, I would probably put 1 to 10. One
physical therapist.
That's
what I was told when I took a tour.
If we had a 3,000 bed hospital here, how many therapists?
Oh, many, many more than that. I mean, we have many therapists for small hospitals that work in, acute therapy. But there wasn't the recognition that there was a need for that. And in the Chinese system, it's very family-centered. So your caregivers are your family. So even in the hospital, when I took a tour of one of the 3,000 bed hospitals, I think this one was actually specialized in women's breast cancer. So that's how specialized their hospitals are. So there's the big 3,000 neuro hospital. There's the big 3,000 bed ortho hospital. And so when I took a tour, it looked kind of like wards like we used to have very long ago in nursing when I first started, where you had 4 patients to a room, 4 beds, and at the end of the bed, there's a little space and then a chair. And that's where the family member was. They would bring you their food, the person's food, the patient's food, help bathe them, do everything that our nursing assistants do. And what the nurses did was chart, do what the doctor tells them, start IVs, but the nurses weren't educating the families because the nurses don't have the knowledge to tell the families of what to do when the person goes home. So there wasn't, when we think post-acute care, that includes rehabilitation that includes home health, hospice, home care, so long-term care, skilled nursing, there just has not been that focus before in China, but that is changing, which is so exciting because, that's where my passion is. And so we have actually partnered with different groups and gone to different cities. Our third trip was Kunming, which is more in southwest China, and have had many invitations to go back, but of course family comes first, so I'm not always able to fulfill those requests. But really, rehabilitation is just booming in China, and there are many people from the US who are collaborating with Chinese over there to build rehab facilities. The problem that we're seeing is that they'll buy equipment, but then nobody teaches them how to use it. No one has taught the nurses how to be rehab nurses. And so, they may have a great facility, but unless they have that education, and I would say that is the most important thing, education for providing good care.
And that's where you come in, right?
That's where we come in.
Giving counsel to people that are going to be the next generation of rehab nurses in China.
Yes.
And so you're educating them from the ground up so that they can be the front runners in that field.
Yes.
Wow, that's very exciting stuff.
It is.
Yeah. So where'd you get that passion, or was it just something that you felt called to help people that don't have the same opportunities we have in the West, or was it more of a I met somebody kind of thing, or?
Well, my first trip was really through the Association of Rehabilitation Nurses when I was the president of that organization. I had always had a passion for sharing that, and I can't even remember how we got the invitation. I believe it was through Chris McDonald from CARF, and Chris travels all over the world, every country, who has rehabilitation and teaches them how to get accredited or educates them on professional standards for rehabilitation units. So now there are some CARF accredited facilities in China and also in the UAE and many other places that CARF goes. And I think that combination of that connection is how I made my first trip there, kind of as a representative of the Association of Rehab Nurses. And then the organization, it wasn't really in their strategic plan to continue to branch out into international yet. And so we were invited to go back by several different groups. And I would say our last trip was to the UAE about a year ago. Similarly, the UAE is very different from China in that the nurses who work there come from all different countries. So in one of our sessions, we may have had 40 different countries represented from all over the world, and they are actually paid pretty significant amounts of money to come and work as nurses in the UAE, which is a very wealthy country.
Yeah, I was going to say they're an oil-rich country, one of the main oil countries in the world, if I'm not mistaken. So
yeah, so that has been another place that we've been, and I wish we could accommodate all the requests we get to go and teach. And of course, in the Eastern and Middle Eastern countries, you might say, well, why don't they just do online, or why don't you just do web-based or things like that? FaceTime is very important, and the connections and having face or who you know and delivering on something you promise is very important. So usually it does require physical trips to places to make those connections in order to then maybe later do things online or a web-based program.
And also in China, there's a lot of red tape through the government, but once you break through that red tape, you basically have everything laid out in front of you. Is that more or less accurate?
I don't know if I would say it that way. I would say yes, the government
you need an in, I guess, is what I'm saying.
You must have an in. Okay, yes, we would call that a gatekeeper person or a key informant. And we were very blessed, and I'm sure it was the Lord opening doors, that our contact there was already connected with the government. So she knew how to get things done, how to build a rehab hospital, which she has within a few years, and also built a nursing school for rehab, and graduated her first 300 nursing students.
Wow, so things are moving quickly.
Yes, but you have to have a person who has that passion, but also the connections through the government. So the government has to approve everything, and they even approve the textbooks that are allowed. So the people in China really value their government and their officials because they take care of them. And that's how it's viewed there. And for them, it's a wonderful thing because there's so many people, but they also can get things done very fast. So if they want to build a building, they have the workers and they have the manpower, and they can do things quickly if you have the right person who's in charge. Yes, and the Lord blessed us to let us have people who were from China or living in China and had all those connections in every case that we've gone over there.
Well, and in China, Christians are increasingly being persecuted. Have you heard anything or seen anything about that? Obviously, you're kind of a guest with high honors when you're there, so that wouldn't be something that you would worry about necessarily. But did you see any of that or hear anything of that?
That's a very interesting question, because we did get counsel from missionaries to China before we went, and asked them their advice. And there are underground churches. What our hosts, when we were there, told us is that usually Christians are not persecuted unless they are saying something against the party.
Sure.
Or the government, which you wouldn't do that anyway as a professional person going over there to do education.
Sure.
But I will tell you, though, the opportunities are very interesting, because on our first trip, one of my translators that was one of the first questions she asked me, if I was a Christian. And I think it might have been because we didn't pray openly when we had dinner together, but we did bow our heads before our meal. And we didn't, flaunt it. We didn't hand out Bibles or things like that. But the fact that we were willing to take our time to come to them and give them something they hungered for and did not have access to, because the government does regulate. I mean, they don't have things like Facebook. They can't just go on the web and pull up anything they want on rehab nursing. We took them copies of our textbooks. We gave them, PowerPoint slides and tools, and we answered all their questions, and we made ourselves available to them for any questions before or after. And many of them still contact me and have become friends. And we'll use WeChat, which is their kind of like their Facebook, Instagram. It's their one thing. And so we got on WeChat, and we still have friends there that we keep in touch with, and we can FaceTime with them on WeChat. And so I think it's probably very similar to being a missionary in a foreign country, is that you have to respect the culture. And that's what we should do. Mm-hmm. That's what we should do as Christians. And we're not going there to, when we go there to teach, it is for the purpose of giving information and doing what we've been asked to do, and not to try to convert them. But I will say, in most of my presentations, I include a chapter or a PowerPoint presentation on culture and religion. And so I will present several religions, many religions, and Christianity is one of them. And usually on my slides, I will say why Christianity is different. I just present it with all the other things, and then often people will come and ask me questions about that. Well, why? Or they'll bring it up in a group. But at least it opens the door to conversation without trying to force your beliefs on someone.
Sure. Well, and I was just at a missions conference this past weekend, and we had a couple missionaries from Papua New Guinea who they run the Samaritan Rescue, and they were saying that exactly what you just said, that these are people that live in the middle of nowhere and have a need that needs to be filled, and you can go in there and throw Bibles at them all you want, but until you go and rescue that person or give them medicine or put them in a plane to get to a hospital, that's their immediate need. And you never know what God's going to do through that. You never know what seeds he's going to plant. And you may in 20 years hear a story about somebody who heard about these 4 religions at a from a nurse in China and decided that one of those religions sounded particularly appealing. And that people can hear about Christianity any way that God chooses for them to hear it. So just being there and being available for questions, and then even just saying the word Christianity in a place like China or anywhere where Christians are persecuted, I think that can make a big difference in a lot of lives. And I think that it'll be interesting to see what fruit comes from that. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, and you make a good point, because in nursing we're taught Maslow's hierarchy, which a lot of people have in their basic core gen ed classes. But for nurses, we really do emphasize that until you meet those physical needs, those basic needs of food, air, water, safety, feeling secure, you can't really help them, move up the ladder. And so I think that's what we're doing when we're educating people, and this is something that they're hungering for, and it's information that they don't have access to. I think the more we show them kindness and provide information and have conversations, and maybe your conversation for us is at 10 at night so that it's an early morning for them, and you may be teaching. One time when we taught for a group in Abu Dhabi and Al Ain over in UAE, we taught all night from 10 p.m. till about 6 a.m. so that we were teaching during their daytime, and that was a web-based training that we had done. But I think all of those talk about being culturally sensitive, culturally congruent, culturally competent, and that really is what nurses are called to be, in no matter where you work in nursing. Well,
and there's evidence of that in Scripture too. I mean, there's a reason that Paul was sent to the Gentiles, and it wasn't some other person. You know what I mean? He understood it better than other people would have, and God put him where he wanted him and where he needed him to be. So I think that God's probably doing about the same thing for you, and that's pretty exciting stuff, I'd say.
It really is exciting. I remember the last trip we made to China, I remember thinking how honored and blessed I felt that God had let me have all these years of experience in exactly the fields that were needed. I had long-term care experience because I was a gero expert. I had rehab experience and had, even been the president of ARN and been an editor for their journal and things like that. And I'd also worked in palliative care and hospice as a nurse practitioner. So just the fact that the Lord brought all those things together, and then with my desire to help internationally and love, especially for the people in China, that was just such a blessing. It really moved me to tears that I could actually experience that in my lifetime.
So looking back 20 years, did you ever think this is where you'd be? That you'd be traveling the world in the top of your field and writing textbooks? And was that ever in the plan?
No.
Your plan, anyway? It was probably in God's plan, but not in yours.
Yeah, I don't think I really thought that far. I think I was thinking more about having a family and raising my children. But I think that all speaks to, if you're open to what God wants you to do and you listen for his voice and you follow him because he's your shepherd and you know his voice, that he will open these doors for you in really miraculous ways that you never thought would be possible in your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can agree with that. The Lord works in mysterious ways, that's for sure. If I look back 2 years, 3 years, I wouldn't have pictured myself here on the mountain being a missionary, running a camp, but God had different plans, and here we are.
And your mother prayed very hard for a long time for this.
Yep. And I appreciate that because I'm happy as a clam where I'm at. So I sure appreciate your prayers. And well, Mom, this has been wonderful. I sure appreciate you coming in and joining us on the mountain for this interview. And we hope to have you back again sometime. Maybe once your next book comes out, you can come and just give us a session just about that.
I would love that. Thank you so much, Kenny.
You're very welcome, and thank you. So, everyone, this has been the Missionary on the Mountain podcast. Tune in next week. Share, like, and subscribe. Find us on YouTube, Facebook. We will be on Apple Podcasts and CastBox soon, trying to get on Spotify and iHeartRadio. Be looking for that. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and have a safe trip down the mountain.
The Missionary on the Mountain podcast is not affiliated with or supported by In Faith or any other mission or organization. We are not funded by nor beholden to anyone but our listeners. All words and opinions expressed on the show are solely those of the individuals expressing them. Find us on YouTube, social media, and your favorite podcast listening platform. Join us next week, and thanks for tuning in to the Missionary on the Mountain podcast.